All right. Well, first, I very much want to give a very big and special thanks, not only to all of the Assessor-Recorder team, but to everyone who's supporting putting on this event today, and most specifically to the San Francisco Public Library for helping us promote this series with all of you who've joined and all the library's patrons. We all know that home ownership provides and can provide a transformational pathway for both personal and financial growth. And ensuring that those pathways are accessible is something that I believe is essential to realizing growth opportunities for all of our communities. But we also know that sad and pervasive realities exist that require collective action to resolve, and that's one of the reasons why we're here. Home ownership is quite often hindered by inequities that in the current home lending and private appraisal processes. And research has shown that disproportionately, the impact of that is borne by communities of color. Nationally, the national median white family holds 8 times the wealth of the typical Black family and 5 times the wealth of the typical Latino family. Now, that's a disconcerting statistic. And when you follow the data, as that statistic shares, it's important that we follow it and speak to the need of home ownership programs and resources specifically for Black and brown households and families. So the city is working very hard to lower those barriers to home ownership through the numerous housing programs expanded under the leadership of our mayor here in San Francisco, Mayor London Breed. And our office is contributing to the effort with educational programming, such as this Family Well series, our new estate planning program that offers free or low-cost estate plans, and by applying a racial equity lens to the work that we do day in and day out, internally and in community. That's why I've spent the past year going to community events, neighborhood association meetings, holding office hours at library branches in the southeast part of our city, because I want to hear directly from you as San Franciscans on what resources and what assistance and what information you need to ensure that yourself and the future generations that you're thinking of can thrive here in San Francisco. So today's topic that we have is how to secure a fair appraisal. Next week, we'll be talking about understanding homeowners associations. And then finally, we'll be talking about foreclosure prevention. That'll take place on July 26th. All of these programs reflect my office's commitment to fair property taxation, advancing racial equity, and on the commitment that we have to support diverse communities and ensure that home ownership is something that is within reach to everyone. So I'd like to share an overview of the Office of the Assessor-Recorder and the outstanding and thoughtful work that this office does to generate billions in revenue for our city. Now, this revenue is key in the city's ability to respond to the needs of everyday San Franciscans. What you'll learn about in this very brief overview, a lot of people come to me and they don't understand what the office does. What does the Assessor-Recorder do? What is its day in and day out responsibilities? And this is meant to share some of that information with you so you have a better sense of what it is we do, in addition to the community programming that you'll be benefiting from today and through this series. We're focused on value, both financial in the revenues that we generate, as well as in our cultural work in community. And we want to expand the public understanding of our office, build financial capacity, and promote the values that we as a city care about around equity and of service to historically underrepresented and underserved communities. Then what I'll do is I'll pass the microphone over to my colleagues so that they can speak more deeply about the appraisal process. So here are some of the primary responsibilities of our office. We assess all real property in the city and county of San Francisco. We collect transfer tax. We grant property tax exemptions, and we record public documents. So our fundamental work is providing that the most stable and secure source of funding so that our departments and our leaders can make strong financial investments, knowing that the dollars will be there for those investments that serve our most basic infrastructure needs, emergency services, our parks, and our schools. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, there's 2 sides to the office, the assessor side and the recorder side. And both are fundamental to securing resources for public services. The work that we do, we start with the number of parcels that exist in the city. That value overall is about $332 billion in value. That then generates about $3.7 billion in annual property tax revenue. About $20 billion in exemptions are granted, which leads to about in the millions of relief for those who qualify for those exemptions. A combination of homeowners exemptions and other exemptions for nonprofit entities that provide services to the city. On the recorder side, you can see that we're responsible for transfer tax and ensuring that we collect about $513 million and also a proactive audit program to ensure that we're not leaving any money on the table. So since 2015, we've recovered almost $72 million in additional revenue for the general fund. And to ensure fair assessment and taxation, we audit all of those transfer tax documents from large corporations and legal entities to ensure that we're not leaving dollars on the table and that people are paying what they owe. And that's essential to good governance, both in terms of ensuring that people are following the letter of the law and also ensuring that there are dollars in place for the investments that I talked about before. And then finally, on the more pragmatic side and functional side, real estate transactions and marriage certificates are some of the most active documents of the over 250 documents that we manage on the recorder side of the house. All of this is to say is that when we do well, the city does well. We're valuing property to ensure that we are gaining from the resources that ensure that our city can function and thrive. Next slide, please. And of course, the Racial Equity Action Plan that is required by city ordinance after the establishment of the Office of Racial Equity to ensure that we are advancing collectively in the city and county of San Francisco racial equity for all of our communities. Again, as I mentioned, both within our departments, and then what can we do creatively to advance cultural conversations that can have political and policy implications in our communities, in conversations with families and individuals that we meet day in and day out. So the racial prejudice and bias that continue to corrode the real estate sector and city governments as they do with society at large, that's a reality. And particularly racism that's evident in real estate and its appraisal, many of the news stories some of you may have read. In my mind, and in the great work that our racial equity team has been pursuing, it really underscores for us the urgency and the importance of promoting a culture of racial equity here at our office, inside of our office at the Assessor-Recorder, internally, and then also through our engagement. We promote staff diversity through intentional recruitment, retention, promotion of underrepresented people of color, and to strengthen a culture of inclusion and belonging, where our diverse identities are welcome and celebrated in the workplace, and to fully develop ourselves as an aware and anti-racist organization that creates meaningful and impactful diversity and inclusion opportunities throughout our public service. Next slide, please. So as part of that work, I'm very pleased that two of the members of the racial equity team, Michael Louie and Alfred Barber, are here with us today. And they're part of the property appraisal team, here to provide you with an overview of the appraisal process, tips on how to obtain an accurate appraisal, how to appeal, and answer any of the questions that you may have. Next slide, please. So much of the work we do to advance equity and strengthen community is built in the engagement that we have in community. That's taken us around the city to neighborhood meetings, as I mentioned, local library branches, street festivals, resource fairs, so we can hear directly from you and also just to raise awareness that we exist as a resource for all of you. We know that the programming that we are bringing to you today is based on so many of those conversations. And because of them, that's one of the reasons we launched an estate planning program, because of what we were hearing from you directly. And that's an important part of the work that we're doing together with our partner, the Housing and Economic Rights Advocates. Next slide, please. So on the estate planning side, if you have not taken advantage of this program, we're focused in the southeastern part of San Francisco because we are following, once again, the data and also in the Western Addition. What this pilot program does is that it lowers the financial barriers to the legal resources that help you secure your assets. Again, when we're talking about stabilizing homeownership opportunities or ensuring their future for future generations, estate planning is an essential component of doing that work. So what we're providing are free or low cost, $400 for moderate income households, 100 estate plans in these two parts of the city, one greater area and one more specifically in the Western Addition. And it's a great value. The savings can be between $3,000 to $3,500 for comprehensive work that helps advance your plans today and for the future. And very often, some of the anecdotes is that when families do not have these resources in place, you are putting your most valuable assets at risk because of the costs associated when you haven't planned and you have to go through probate. But that's for a different conversation. We have programming about that later on. But if you do have questions, please do reach out to our office. Next slide, please. So the Digital Family Wealth Series, these are educational presentations. They're meant to be informative for you and educational and give you the resources that you need. This is something that we started during the pandemic and just have expanded on because of how useful it's been, how much easier it is for people to join us. We had over 1,100 viewers last year of people who are showing interest in our work. And we have 2 more Family Wealth Series presentations in collaboration with HERA, Housing and Economic Rights Advocates, on understanding homeownership associations and foreclosure prevention. I mentioned those earlier, just reminding you about them right now. And then also very much I'm looking forward to conversations when I talk about the external work that we do in advancing conversations around the importance of racial equity and the work that we can and should be doing together, not only in the workplace, but in community. That's one of the conversations I'll be having in partnership with the San Francisco Bay Area Planning and Urban Research Association, that's SPUR. They're a local nonprofit public policy organization that I also have the pleasure of serving on their board. And we're going to continue the conversation on historic discrimination housing policy that has had effects in shaping our city. Our panel is called Answering the Call to Build Equitable Housing. And we're going to feature fair housing thought leaders from UC Berkeley and Sacramento as part of that conversation. And we're going to talk about all the tools that people have used legally to enable those exclusionary practices, from redlining to racist covenants, and also how less overt but equally malicious transcriptions continue to persist today, such as under appraisals for property owners of color. Again, I mentioned some of those news stories that some of you may see. My staff's going to drop the registration link in the chat box as well. Next slide, please. So finally, just don't hesitate to reach out. There's going to be a lot of information that comes at you today. And if you have any questions, this is just meant to kind of perk your interest. Be available to answer any questions that you might have. But if there's more that comes to you, please do reach out. It helps us develop our programming, as I mentioned, but also we can answer your questions in real time as well. So here we have our email, our phone number, and then of course you can always walk into City Hall, pull a number when you come in through room 190, and we're open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And of course, you can always go to our website with lots of translated documents, frequently asked questions and their answers at our website, sfassessor.org. Okay, so now for the main event, all about fair appraisals. I'm very, very happy and honored that I get to work with such extraordinary colleagues in Michael Louie and Alfred Barber. The wealth of knowledge and experience that they bring is something that you're about to benefit from. So please feel free to type in your questions in the question and answer box, and we'll be sure that we can address them either in real time or at the very end of the presentation. If we don't get to your question today, we'll follow up with you directly. So please do leave your contact information in there, the best way that you prefer to be reached with your question, so we can make sure to get that to you as well. So with that, I'm going to first introducing Michael Louie, a real property appraiser from our office. Welcome, Michael, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Joaquin, for offering this presentation to help our property taxpayers and the public at large. As you may well know, the role of the appraiser and the appraisal process have been in the news. Therefore, the topic of getting a fair appraisal is very timely. Good afternoon. I am Michael Louie, real property appraiser here at the San Francisco Assessor's Office. Prior to my government service, I have spent my career with numerous banks as an appraiser, going out to people's properties, and as a reviewer, looking over other appraisers' work for quality and error. I have also managed a staff of bank appraisers and reviewers, in addition to a panel of 2,000 independent fee appraisers. I have also been involved in the purchase and sale of bulk loans, known as the secondary market, and I have also been an independent fee appraiser. Therefore, I have the unique perspective, understanding of the appraisal process from start to finish, both the front and back ends of the lending business. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. What is an appraisal? Facts and myths. An appraisal is just an opinion of value by one appraiser at a point in time. It does not set the worth of your property. Only the marketplace participants, the buyers and sellers, can do that. An appraisal done for lending will look back in time for properties that have sold. It does not predict the future value of your property. An appraisal can be done in two ways. The report can be a full report with interior inspection, or a simple drive-by that is based on loan to value, LTV, or the lender's guidelines and internal policies. Getting your property appraised will not increase your property taxes. Next slide, please. The role of an appraiser. The use of an appraiser is really protect the lender's interest in the amount loaned out, even though you, the borrower, pays for the appraisal report. If you take a look at the front top page of the report, it will list the lender's name as a client, not you, the borrower. The appraiser really acts as the eyes for the lender, looking at the condition of your place, any updates or remodeling, also looking for health and safety hazards and illegal uses within and around the property. The appraiser, when he accepts the assignment, needs to be competent and knowledgeable in the neighborhood or area appraised. If the appraiser is not, then the person needs to secure additional help from a colleague. The appraiser needs to be fair and impartial to the homeowner without regards to race, religion, income, wealth, or even rapport and communication or the lack thereof. Next slide, please. The appraisal process, what I call the front-facing end. Ordering the appraisal is usually one of the last things done in the loan process. The person who comes out is most likely an independent fee appraiser rather than a bank employee these days. Before coming out to your property, the appraiser does research on your property by checking the public records and multiple listing service, MLS, on the room count, square footage, any improvements, the type of housing. And the person will also do a preliminary search of possible comps to use. During the inspection itself, the appraiser will come out and then walk around the property, making notes, noting the room count, sketch out your property, locating the different rooms on it, measuring out the place, and taking both interior and exterior photos of your property. After the inspection, once the appraiser gets a better idea He will select appropriate comps, and then he needs to, the appraiser needs to drive them. When the report is completed and sent, and the report is completed and then sent to the lender. Next slide, please. The appraisal process in the background. Upon receipt of the appraisal report, the in-house staff reviewer will take a look at the report for any overvaluation, the property condition, updates or remodeling, any safety hazards, illegal usage. And then the reviewer will also take a look at photos and languages within the report to see if it will conflict with fair lending guidelines. The photos in the report cannot have pictures of the occupants. Even the photos of the comps, the exterior photos should not have people walking by or loitering around the properties. Also, the languages should not refer to, I have seen this myself, where someone indicated on Clement Street that the neighboring businesses have non-English signage. And another one was in the Mission, where someone noted it's a Hispanic neighborhood. And then oftentimes I see the report will refer to something like a church, synagogue, a temple, a mosque. These places should not be in the report. It should be referred as houses of worship. The appraiser reviewer may condition the report for these kind of corrections and may even lower the appraisal value based on better sales information. Once funded by the lender, the appraisal is part of your loan file. The loan file, when funded, is graded and insured for risk to the lender itself, if it's going to be housed as a portfolio loan, or to the investor if it's going to be sold in the secondary market. The loan file is then placed in a package of numerous loans. If it's going to be sold in the secondary market, this selling takes place typically within 2 weeks of funding of your loan. Next slide, please. Getting a fair appraisal, your responsibility. Before the appraisal inspection, please put away personal photos, controversial artwork, and items. In the past, I have seen a Confederate flag. I've seen guns laying about. I've even been into a house where there was a marijuana grow farm in the attic. That was before it became legalized in California. So when I was out there, I did not see the marijuana plants, but I see the walls and ceiling covered by foil wraps, and then there's spotlights, and then there's also rubber tube water hoses. So that will affect that particular homeowner from getting his loan. Also make sure there's no excessive trash or hoarding situation, no offensive odors in the home, garage, or yard, or dog piles in the rear yard, because the appraiser will need to walk out to the backyard and take a rear photo of your property. I've been inside homes where the house is filled with personal effects that when I opened the shower door, there was a vacuum cleaner inside. And then another house, I went and then tried to go to the garage and the rear yard. Once I opened the door just to go into the garage, I could not go downstairs because there was this really offensive odor from dogs running around inside the garage. That kind of stuff you want to take care of before the inspection. when you have a chance, also make a list of significant improvements of your property within the past 10 years for the appraiser. Items like conversion of the basement, extension to the house, a new heating unit, new windows that may not be evident upon first glance. There's no need to make a note of minor repairs or replacement of like, oh, faucet or electrical outlet or painting a room. These items do not have a great effect on value. During the appraisal inspection, please respect the appraiser's time. No long talk about your family or politics. Do not ask the appraiser what the value is. Most likely, the person may not know what it is. Hand over that list of improvements that you compiled. Also, hand over any sales or information from local agents, houses that you know are similar to yours, also houses that you have been inside. The appraiser may consider it. The appraiser may even have the information already. After the appraisal inspection, if the loan is funded or rejected, you should get automatically a copy of the appraisal report from the lender. Look over the appraisal report for errors, particularly the sketch, to see if it matches your house in reality. If your house is 25 feet wide, and then the sketch has, for example, in one case I've seen, 18 feet wide on the first floor, 20 feet wide on the second floor, you know that is an error. That needs to be, either the appraiser needs to come back out or needs to redo the report sketch. Sometimes the basement area or some extension may not be included in main living area. And why not? It needs to be explained within the report. It needs to be valued as living area. It's part of the main living area in terms of quality, condition, function. Or it could be separated out as a finished basement and given some value, but it should not be excluded or not pay attention to. Also, another important thing to look for are the comps. Are they all similar in terms of style, condition, upgrading as to your property? Are all the comps or most of them from your neighborhood? If not, it needs to be explained. If you happen to disagree with your value, please contact your loan agent and mortgage broker for help. Perhaps, if possible, you can talk to the reviewer as to the reason for the revised lower value or rejection of the appraisal report, and to get a reconsideration if you have good market support. Thank you. I hope this hints, insights will help you in the future when you apply for a loan. And right now, I want to introduce Al Barber, a colleague of mine, a real estate appraiser. He's going to be talking about the appraisal process from the perspective of property tax assessment here at the assessor's office. Again, thank you for your time.
Hey, Michael, thank you for an excellent presentation and really guiding us through this fee appraisal side of the value of a property. You know, a lot of folks have questions and I love seeing them typed into the chat. We're going to address those questions after I finish the part about how to get a fair value in dealing with the government and dealing with the Assessor-Recorder's office as well as the AAB office. So as they come, just drop them in the chat. We'll address those shortly, okay? And maybe I can address some even in some of the process, depending on what some of the questions are. Okay, so hey, my name is Al Barber. I am a appraiser here. I've been with the city about 10 years. Prior to this, I was working in Washington, D.C., also doing the same thing in our nation's capital, which is a very innovative area, and they've taken assessments and appraisals to the next level. And so I bring that talent here. And even before I was working with them, I was doing new construction as a general contractor, had my own outfit there, as well as a real estate broker and investor. So I come from different backgrounds, have wear different hats at different times. And so what I want to present to you guys today is, you know, here at the Assessor-Recorder office, we deal with assessments, and our assessment and opinion of value is not always one that our taxpayers agree upon or our tax representatives agree upon. So what happens if you disagree with this particular assessment, right? And the way you get an assessment too, I'll name a few ways, right? It's July, so end of the month, we'll be sending out our fiscal year 2022 notice of assessed value. And here you'll be receiving what your factored base year value is as of January 1st of 2020, right? So everyone that owns a property is getting that every year, right? So that's one way you get notified of what an assessment value is from our office. The second way is if you had a change in ownership, whether you bought a property or you had some partial transfer, maybe you gave some to a sister and maybe like 30%, and that became reassessable, right? That could trigger what we call a reassessment event, right? By a partial transfer, change in ownership. The other way to get a supplemental is to have some kind of new construction event, right? For instance, say you build an addition on your property, you expand it, or you convert a basement, or you add a new bathroom, or remodel, like renovate, I should say renovate, a kitchen, and you bring it up to this modern standard, right? That's another way that you could receive a new construction reassessment. And those are establishing new base years, okay, for those specific events as of an event date. And then another way you can get a notice from our office is from a calamity filing, right? So when, say you have a fire that happens, or a flood, or some other type of external obsolescence, like a car crashes into your property, thereby damaging a third of the building, right? So you'd have a reduction in value called a calamity, right? And maybe you don't agree with the calamity report and it's been reassessed there in terms of the reduction applied. So there's 4 ways you can kind of hear about value from our office, right? And so if you received a notice, whether it's a notice of assessed value known as the NAV letter, which you'll be getting in the next few weeks, or some kind of supplemental or an escape that's associated with the change in ownership or a new construction event, or some kind of calamity, right? You have the ability to actually appeal those assessments. And so I'm going to just describe a couple of the ways you do that, right? Our first way is the informal way, right? So essentially when it's informal, you want to reach out to the area appraiser who is responsible for rendering that assessment. And so if we're saying that it was a change in ownership or a new construction event, and you see the event on the notice, and you see the value that's been added, and you see the before and the after, and maybe you don't agree with that. So first step I would do is actually reach out to the appraiser of the neighborhood that actually rendered that value and have a conversation. Get to talking to them about what they use for their comps, or what was the basis for the new construction reassessment, or what did they use for the calamity, to find out what they specifically did, right? And maybe they sent you a request for information known as a 441D request, and you didn't respond. And if you don't respond, you're kind of giving the assessor's office like to do the discovery on our own, right? And so you always have more information about a specific event or a specific new construction or a calamity than we may have. So you want to be forthgoing in submitting that information. Maybe it's a fee appraisal, maybe it's a list of comparables that you got from what we call a broker price opinion from a real estate agent or real estate broker. And it shows as of January 1 what the value is, or as of a specific date, you paid X dollars for this property, or fee appraisal like Michael was just talking about. You have a fee appraisal from a purchase or refinance that is not in alignment with the value that's being added to your assessment. So you want to give our appraisers a chance to have a conversation, to review your documentation. Maybe they don't have the documentation. And then from that point, you can have a discussion. Now, the informal piece, though, it's not year round, right? But what I would say is the moment you get a supplemental or escape notice, you definitely want to reach out. But if it comes to the annual appeal, you really want to look at January through March 31st as that appeal window, because it's not open all year round. So January 1 through March 31st is when our office, the Assessor-Recorder office, is going to have the informal review. Now, the informal review is not available to all properties. Okay, I will warn you there. It's really for single family homes, condos, townhouses, co-ops, but it's not for folks that have a TIC, like a tenancy in common building, where that has like a TIC group, or some kind of commercial property that's income generating, right? And so we're looking at units between 4 or less, okay? But we're excluding TICs, okay? So it's a residential property with 4 units or less. Okay, so those are the properties that qualify for an informal review. Now, how do you apply? Well, first thing is on January 1 through March 31st, you can come to our website, right? So the Assessor-Recorder's website is very simple to get to, sfassessor.org. And there we'll have one of our little blue bars on the left that says submit application for informal repeal. Okay, and that's going to get the stuff generated in our office to see about this property in terms of review when it comes time for our appraisers to review it. Okay, in that application process, you also want to submit documentation. Remember, Michael Louie was telling you about giving a fee appraiser some comparables that you believe that are most like your property and really share characteristics and should have the same value as your property. And so what you want to do is give those comparables to our appraisers for review as well. And say, for instance, there's some condition issues that we don't know about, right? There's a conversation here in the chat about deferred maintenance. If you have some deferred maintenance and we don't know about, there's holes in the roof, there's water damage, you have a contractor's repair estimate for scope of work, submit that as well, right? Because that's going to show what the cost to cure those ailments for that property and how that's affecting the fair market value. Remember, our office is really concerned about fair market value as a specific event date, whether it's January 1, which is our lien date, and that's what the notice of assessed value is really concerned with. So the letter you'll get this July is going to be January 1 of 2022. Okay. Now, if you have a specific event, it's going to be for that specific event. And then we're going to look at a window of time, 90 days out, and then you can go back as far as you need to. Okay. But you'll apply with our office. Our office will review that information and we'll discern what is applicable to the situation. Okay. Now, if you do get a reduction or you don't get a reduction, we don't necessarily communicate that right away. The way that gets communicated, right, is going to be in the notice of assessed value letter that is going out in July. Right. So folks, let's just do a little rewind here. So folks that applied for informal review back in January through March that submitted the application and their comps are going to get notified. And they're going to get notified in the next couple of weeks through the notice of assessed value. So that's how our office essentially notifies you all of the results, right? Whether it's a temporary reduction, a permanent reduction, or no reduction at all. Okay. But if you're not satisfied with that communique, maybe the reduction wasn't as to the level you desired or you believe it to be, and you believe that you have more evidence or you have more substantial documentation and you'd like to take it a little further, we have another step. Okay, so I just wanted to cover the informal review. That's kind of step 1 for residential properties up to 4 units or less. Okay, now say you hear from our office, you don't agree with the informal review, or the conversation with the appraiser didn't go anywhere, or you just didn't get the answer you wanted, right? So you have a second option. The second option is a formal aspect. Okay, now the formal aspect is going to take place with the Assessment Appeals Board, who is not associated with the assessor's office. Okay, they're an independent board and they're selected by the Board of Supes, the Board of Supervisors. Okay, and they're going to be located here at City Hall. I'm at City Hall. Michael's at City Hall right here too, and they're going to be on the 4th floor. Okay, so that group is here at City Hall. I think it's 405 is the room number. We'll talk a little bit about their website in just a moment. And essentially there, you're going to fill out a formal appeal application. Okay, and that's known as the AAB application. Okay, and the AAB is just an acronym for the Assessment Appeals Board. So what is the Assessment Appeals Board? Well, it's an independent group, and their role here in the city is to essentially help homeowners get a second opportunity at hearing their fair market value presentation, but to equalize them within fair market value, because our goal is not to overassess or underassess, but it's actually to apply fair market value across the board. Okay, so the Assessment Appeals Board is a opportunity for you all to appeal your valuation. Okay, or it could be a accessibility determination, right? And that has to do with, like, you don't believe that you should never have been assessed for a change of ownership. They also take care of that. And so what they'll do, they'll conduct a fair and impartial review, and they'll have a hearing, right? And the hearing could be done in two different ways. But let me just describe how you want to do your assessment. So if we could, let's pull up the AAB's website, and let's look at some of the basic information here. Now, on the basic information for their website, you'll see that they have a filing period. And so the filing period actually just started July 2nd. Okay. And now this filing period is for those that are appealing their January 1 lien date of 2022. Okay. So the 2022 lien date, which is January 1, the application process starts on July 2nd and goes all the way to September 15th. I'll repeat, it starts on July 2nd and then concludes on September 15th. Okay, so that's when you have your opportunity to apply with the Assessment Appeals Board for the temporary reduction. And when I say temporary reduction, that's going to deal with just the 1 year, right? And the 1 year is going to apply for you all from January 1 of 2022 to December 31st of 2022. Okay, they used to have an online application process, but now they're back to the formal piece. So you'll actually print out the application and pull that down and then mail it in with your application fee and your evidence of support to their office. Now so I mentioned the annual review piece, and that's for our secured and unsecured assessments as of the lien date, but there's also supplemental, escapes, and roll corrections that also could be appealed as well. And remember, I was saying about supplementals are something that is triggered. Supplemental escapes are triggered by a change in ownership or a new construction event, or we're picking up a calamity resolution, right? So for instance, you had a burnt down house, we took away about a third of the value. Now the new construction is complete. Now we're adding that back on, but during that construction process, maybe you added a couple new bedrooms, a couple new bathrooms. Maybe you added a third floor onto your second floor, your two-story property. You know, people do expand more than they start off with when they get assurance payouts. So maybe we picked up some a higher value. And so maybe you don't agree with the value we picked up. And so that's what you'll also do. You'll put down the specific event that you're appealing, right? Whether it's the lien date or it's the event date that is allocated to your change in ownership, new construction, or that calamity reassessment. Okay, so during this period when you're filing with this formal appeal, it's a 2-page application. You're going to also do it within 60 days of receiving a notice as well, right? So I talked about the annual piece, which is our every year, right? You have the opportunity from July 2nd up to September 15th, which is this year. But if you get a supplemental, an escape, or some kind of roll correction, you'll have 60 days to appeal from the date of those notices. But what if you didn't get a notice? What if you didn't receive an escape or a supplemental? You still have some appeal rights. And this does happen when people have different mailing addresses, or maybe they just bought and were using a different one, or at the closing, they didn't put the new address that they're going to receive all their mail from, and they had their old apartment or something. Well, that happens. So your next opportunity, if you never got a notice and you see something in the mail called a tax bill, and the tax bill is a lot higher than you expected, well, that could be the supplemental or the escape tax bill or the roll correction, right? And you'll have 60 days from that date on that notice to file an appeal. Okay, so there's a number of ways that you can file, right? But I just want to make sure you guys know 60 days is a hard deadline, right? The AAB is going to look at what's been postmarked, and it's got to be within those 60 days. So make sure you file timely and early if you don't agree. Okay, and I've been there. I've actually appealed mine in another county, Contra Costa. So if you don't agree, you don't agree, and so you got to do what you got to do. But here you're going to do a physical application, and the AAB, of course, is going to take that application with your support documentation, maybe that fee appraisal, that property condition report with a lot of photos showing you the deferred maintenance and how much the cost to cure is, what your contractor's telling you is going to cost us to fix, or you have a fire calamity report. There's a number of things, right? A broker price opinion, which shows a number of comps and how they think your value would sell as of that specific event date. Okay. There's also times when you need to also submit some other information, right? Say it's an income producing property or something like that. You'll need to supply the leases, the rent roll, which is the rents for each unit and how much that brings in each month, and the income and expenses. Okay, so you'll receive stuff from our office called the 441D request. And that's basically a request for information, and we're requesting specific information related to that property. Okay, so once they receive the application, they process it. The AAB is actually going to send you all a notice that says, hey, we received your application, and they'll schedule it. Okay, and they usually, once they acknowledge it, they'll get you into a queue where they'll schedule that hearing. Usually 45 days out is when they'll notify you of the upcoming hearing. Okay, I'll repeat, they'll notify you about 45 days out from that upcoming hearing. And at that point, the AAB is going to have one of two options, right? On the application itself, you could have checked the hearing officer, or you could have checked the board, okay, which is a panel of 3 officers, okay? And, you know, if it's a residential property, you might as well just go with the hearing officer, you know, because that way it gives you another option as well if that doesn't work out. But if you have a residential property and you meet with this hearing officer, you'll have like a one-on-one with the hearing officer, and one of our appraisers will be there as well as the AAB kind of processor who's going to be conducting the hearing. They'll hear your thoughts, your presentation, and both sides will review the documentation. The appraiser side, our side, is going to present our presentation, which means it's going to be an appraisal, right? It could be a market appraisal. We're going to use one of or all 3 approaches, right? The sales approach, the cost approach, or the income approach, or or a combination of all 3. Okay, and so we're going to present our evidence and our approaches, and then you'll have a chance to do some Q&A, and then it'll flip, right? And then it'll go back the other way. And the hearing officer will also engage on asking questions of the appraiser's office as well as the taxpayer themselves, right? So be prepared when your hearing is scheduled. So that's the hearing officer. And so the hearing officer renders a decision. Say you don't agree with that decision, you still have 14 days to file for having it moved up to the 3-panel board hearing. Okay, so that's why I say if you have a residential property, something that's 4 units or less, start off at the hearing officer level. Now, if you're at a commercial property, you don't really have that option. You're going to be going to a board. Okay, and you could do a board if you wanted to go straight to the board with the residential, but at least you get kind of you got a second chance, right? If you start off with a hearing officer. But if you have a commercial property or an income producing property that's over 4 units, 5 units or more, or a store or an office or a warehouse, industrial, or what have you, you're going to have to meet with a 3-panel board. Okay, and that board panel is a little more formalized and a lot more structure. So there, you definitely want to have all your ducks in a row and kind of have your documents made up. If you're doing a hearing officer, you need 3 copies, okay? And then also keep a copy for yourself, because those copies are going to go to 1, us, the city, and 2, the hearing officer, and then 3 for yourself, okay? Now, if it's a board, you'll need 6 copies, right? And again, it's 1 for each of the board members, 1 for myself, or whoever is the appraiser at the time for this hearing, and then 1 for the county. Okay, so that's how the different panels work. Now, once you made the presentations, you presented all your evidence, you went back and forth, kind of like in the hearing or the board presentation. It's kind of like a court setup. It kind of reminds me of Judge Judy a little bit, just not so antagonistic. But it's in an environment like that, though. Okay, it's very formal. And then so you're going back and forth, and at that point, if it's a board hearing, they won't tell you what the decision is right away. The hearing officer, they may tell you, hey, here's the value, and you get your kind of carbon copy of what the result was, unless they take it into review for the more tough cases, right? They might take it for review. But if they take it in review, or if it's a board case, they're going to render a decision at some point. And when they render a decision, that's going to be a formal notification to our office, the assessor's office, of that decision. Okay, and then from there, if there's a change in the assessment, or if there's not a change, our office is going to make the change in our system. That's going to flow over to the tax collector's side. And if you have a reduction, for instance, then that's where you get a refund or some kind of adjustment. Maybe they issue a new tax bill. And so the tax collector essentially is going to process that information and issue the refund if there is a reduction or some type of new tax bill. Okay, and they call that a controller letter, is what we receive. So that's kind of the flow of how it goes, right? So you have multiple ways that you could do it, right? So what I want to do is show them the application real quick. Why don't we scroll up to the forms area of the website. See, on this top gray bar, you'll see it says It has a little house to the left, then it says FAQs, then it says forms and documents. If you click forms and documents, that's going to take you to the page where you actually get the application itself. If you scroll down here, you'll notice that the application is about 2/3 of the way down under a application for change assessment. You'll click the assessment appeal application form. It's a PDF, right? And so you could fill it out digitally like you see here. And the first portion is going to be the applicant information, your mailing address, email, phone number, etc. Maybe you have another contact who's going to be your representative, maybe an agent, an attorney, or even a relative. Like I met with someone the other day who's going to have their son do it, right? So the son would fill out the bottom portion of number 2. And they would also sign for the agent of authorization, and that's going to be the signature of you, the applicant, giving them the opportunity to represent your interest, right? And then you also have a little letter of authorization where you could check that little box too. You notice part 3, that's where you're going to state your property, what it is, right? So you say, hey, is this property a single family dwelling that's occupied as a principal residence by the owner? To say yes, that kind of gets you into another bucket, right? Or if you say no, then that's fine too. But the main thing is you want to put your assessor parcel number, known as your APN, or your lot and block number. Plug that in. Also plug in your property address or location for this specific property that you will be appealing. Then after that, you want to check box one of the property types, whether it's single family, multifamily, commercial, industrial, or land, right? Say it's vacant land, you can click that. Or what if it's a TIC, like a tenancy in common? Maybe you click other and write in tenancy in common or something like that. Okay. Then the next part, in part 4, you want to put on what's the roll on the value. When we say value on the roll, what we mean is you received a notice, and on that notice, it has a before value and an after. You want to put the after value, right? So that's the value on the roll that you want to place there. You'll put the land, the improvements, just adjacent to those areas, right? And then, of course, in column B, it's going to be your opinion of value, because you have an opinion, just like we have an opinion. And so you want to put that opinion down here, and you could pretty much put a whole number like the total if you don't want to break it up down to land improvements. That's not necessary for your side, but for us, we are telling you what we have allocated for that assessment. If you scroll to the second page, you'll notice in section 5, this is the type assessment being appealed. Very important. Now, I told you about the notice of assessed value. That notice of assessed value is a regular assessment as of January 1. So you get a supplemental notice, you'll put that date of that notice in the roll year that it impacts, right? So say, for instance, that's 2021. Or if you have a roll change, maybe it's an escape assessment or a calamity or a penalty assessment, you'll put that date of that notice in a roll year. Now, you'll have a reason for filing in section 6. Maybe it's a decline in value. Maybe there's a change in ownership that you don't agree upon. Or maybe there's a new construction event that happened that you don't believe that should be reassessed, right? So you could go to section C, check box 2, and put the date in that we've said that the new event date, right? So those are a couple little areas. Those are the main areas that people are appealing on the application. Now you scroll down a little bit more, section 7, written findings, right? It's kind of expensive, $250 per hour, right? You either request it or you don't request it, but they will ask for you to to bring a check to the hearing if you do say written facts. Written facts are if you're going to go to the superior court level, right? It's not necessary if you're going to the board level, okay? But it's something that you could do. It's going to cost you. Section 8, the application is designated as a claim for refund. Of course, you want your money back. You're going to click yes, but make sure you do that on this form. Section 9, you're going to say, well, do I want a hearing officer? Remember, that was the one individual you'll be meeting. Remember, that's only residential, single family, co-ops, condos, multifamilies, 4 or less. You'll click hearing officer. But if it's something else like a commercial property, or you just want to go straight to the board, go for it. You can click that board hearing. Okay. And then under the certification piece, you'll sign name, date, phone number, all that. And then you also say who you are, right? Are you the owner, the agent, spouse, etc. Right? You'll click those. Okay. So that's the application, and that's how that's handled. Now, what I want to do is you understand the process, you understand some of the ins and outs. Let's go to some of these questions, because some of these kind of lean into why you would even contact an appraiser or have an appeal. So the first question that we have here, how does the assessor's office determine true value if they don't inspect the property? That's a good question. If they don't inspect the property, they don't know the condition, and you've got a ton of deferred maintenance, how do they know? Well, we might not know, right? And that's where you want to get in contact with the appraiser of your neighborhood to submit some of that information. Maybe it's pictures. Remember, I was telling you about the scope of work from a general contractor. It's going to illustrate the cost to cure. And then you'll also have maybe a fee appraisal that says, hey, my appraisal is actually $700,000, not the $1 million that my factored base year value is. Okay. So you definitely want to contact our office to explain about some deferred maintenance with all your evidence. Brenda asked, after the death of a spouse, I'm told that I should have the house reappraised. Can I get that done from your office? You know, Brenda, what they're asking you to do here is they're asking you to get a fee appraiser. So it's a third-party independent appraiser, not from us in the county, but from a third party, right? Like Michael was telling you as a fee appraiser. So you want to hire them to do what's called a date of death appraisal. And a date of death is going to be the date that the spouse passed away. Okay. And unfortunately, I apologize for someone losing their spouse. And it's a big need, you know, a lost section of your heart when that happens. But you definitely want to take some action to get in a fee appraisal, because that's going to affect you when it goes time to file for your step up value with your taxes. Okay. That's the federal government side. But it also helps you, say, for instance, you have a reassessment event and our office says, oh, now it's worth 2 million and your before is like 500,000 for your factor base year. And the appraisal you just got said, no, it's really 1.2 million. You definitely want to have that fee appraisal to submit to our office to get that handled and to have us look at that fair market value. And it's because there's probably some condition stuff that we don't know about, like we talked about in the earlier question about deferred maintenance. Okay. Now we have a third question here is, I love the anonymous ones, right? Well, how does an appraiser put value on non-permitted improvements? You know, that's interesting, really. Appraisal is a lot of opinion of values, right? So if we discover some unwarranted work that's been done, we are going to pick up value. Maybe it not be the full value, right? But we are going to pick up value. Okay. And so say, for instance, the property is reported to maybe planning or something like that, or a neighbor rats you out and you got a complaint. Well, we just find out it from walking the neighborhood. We see some unpermitted work. Well, we'll add that to the record and we'll create a new base year assessment for that new construction portion that's been improved upon, even without a permit. And so we'll use various cost models on what it would cost to build that out. And maybe we'll give you a little more credit for it being unwarranted, but we will pick that value up. So if you think that you're going to kind of escape reassessments and stuff, that might not happen. You know, we have things called neighbors and we get a lot of information from your neighbors. Your neighbors call numbers anonymously and report that other folks. We have reports that we receive, even DBI, right? They'll communicate with us. So there's a ton of ways that we find out about, you know, non-permitted improvements. So just
Al,
know, yes.
pardon me.
Yeah.
Perhaps this person is asking about non-permitted improvements, how it reflects in the appraisal report. Perhaps I can also share from the perspective of a lender and the fee appraisal world.
Oh, that's a good one.
When, say, for example, you put in a rear addition or remodel kitchen or a finished basement and you did not bother to get the permit, oftentimes people will get a permit for the electrical work, but not get the permit for the entire renovation.
Right.
If something is done in the same quality, workmanship, and function as the main house, it should be valued as part of the main living area. Sometimes people do get permits, and then the quality of the lower level is very different from upstairs, and then you have to go through the garage, and then the quality, utility, function is different. Even with permits, that cannot be valued as part of the main living area. Right. However, some value should be given as a finished basement or in-law unit. The appraiser should not just simply ignore it, because when you go to the Sunset, the most expensive houses are the 1-2 levels of equal quality workmanship, and then the next expensive would be the houses with finished in-law units. And then the least expensive are the one with just a garage with no areas that could be rented out for additional income. Hope that helps to the anonymous attendee.
So what Michael's kind of saying is, if you're going to do the work, get a permit, right? You could even do a legalization permit. Like, say, for instance, you bought a house and it had some unpermitted work. You can hit up DBI. When I say hit up, I mean go to DBI, the Department of Building Inspections, and inquire about a legalization permit, right? Because you want to legalize, say, for instance, an unwarranted basement finish that a previous owner did, right? And so you want to legalize that. That's going to cost you a lot less than what it would be to take a permit out to actually convert a basement. Okay, so legalization is a process of converting what already exists that's unwarranted into warranted space. That's going to be cheaper for you. It's going to be a cheaper cost, and it's also going to be a lower assessment when it comes to the reassessment piece. Now, I see this question too. A couple of folks wanted to know about financing for ADUs. You know, our office doesn't do financing. Period, right? The city of San Francisco, unlike DC, doesn't really give taxpayers money to build homes or renovate homes or make certain improvements. I remember when I was in DC, there was a way to make your home like a green home. So there was like grants and money that would come from the government, or even for landscaping. They had landscaping for doing gray water collection and stuff, because that cheapened the cost for the city to manage that piece of that pie, right? And so here in San Francisco, there is no money for it, right? But you might find some nonprofits and some third parties that may be into this whole ADU concept for financing. But be careful though. I have seen some where someone gives you financing and they say, okay, you're going to rent this thing out for $1,000. You're going to give me 60% of that rent, right? And it's, at the end of the day, they're not really giving you anything. You might as well go the traditional route, get some commercial funding, finance it yourself, use your own credit, and keep that whole $1,000. Because I've seen people sign contracts with folks for 20 and 30 years, and they allow these people to make money off of them, and they've never really contributed to this besides giving them some money to put some sticks on some dirt. Okay. Remember, when I say dirt, I mean land value. Land value is the most valuable thing here in San Francisco, really the world. Because when you talk about real estate, you're talking about location, location, location. And you only have that with the dirt. Where's that dirt located? Right. So remember, you have an asset and you want to leverage that asset. There's numerous ways you can do it. Now, I'm not giving you financial or legal advice. I repeat, I'm not giving you financial or legal advice, but if you're going to do financing for an ADU, you want to contact a commercial bank that deals with loans that are for those kind of products. A lot of folks are doing home equity lines of credit, like HELOCs, right? Stuff like that are taking a second out. But there's a plethora of information out there. I'll let you kind of get on the search engines and plug that in. Last question here before we kind of open up, maybe you have some verbal questions. Can we explain the formal Prop 8 process? So I did explain formal 8 process, but I'll repeat what it is. It's when you get the notice of assessed value between between now and say the end of July, you're going to get the notice, okay? And that's where you're going to file for an appeal from July 2nd to September 15th. Now that's the formal Prop 8 or Proposition 8 process. And that only gives you a temporary reduction, right? You're not adjusting the base year. If we did an adjustment for the base year, that's permanent. But if we're doing a Prop 8, that's a temporary adjustment. And that's only good for 1 year, from January 1 of this 2022 to December 31st of 2022. Okay, so that's the Prop 8. It's only good for 1 year. You apply literally now from July 2nd to September 15th. And it's still going to be a formal application through the Assessment Appeals Board. And that I'm glad we were able to kind of show you the application and kind of just bullet point a couple things you'll check there. So you'll be checking that annual assessment piece for the Prop 8. Okay, and this is why I like, I didn't want to answer these questions in the chat because there's always follow-up. Like you'll answer one question, there'll be more follow-up. Plus you wouldn't get it in the recording. And I think more people want to hear it on what's going on here. So regarding legal ADUs, because ADU is a big deal right now, right? California passed a law where if you have a single family, you can add up to 1 ADU, right? Some cases you can even do a JDU, right? A junior ADU. You might get away with junior ADU and an ADU. And then if you have a multifamily property, you can add up to 2 ADUs. That means 2 more units, 2 more buildings. So I have a ton of people just knocking out the garage and throwing up 2 big units on the basement or the lower level, turning those into units. So regarding the legal ADU, does the assessor use the income approach or the square foot valuation, like the market approach? It's funny, we'll actually use both, but we do find that the income approach, one, it's going to render a higher valuation because now you're getting income and we have proof of what the income is. And remember, we are hip to what rents are in the city too. We have a rent database. So that rent database supplies us with what other folks are getting. Plus we have this thing called the MLS, the multiple listing service. So don't think you can kind of get away. We're going to know what income is ADU is going to generate. And we're also going to know if somebody sold them, maybe they sell it as a TIC, like they haven't qualified for the condo conversion, they're selling them. We'll also have the market value for ADUs. And when it comes to the square foot valuation, we might even also use the cost approach. And so the cost approach, we have a couple cost models, right? Most people have probably heard of Marshall and Swift. That's kind of a national service for doing new construction costs. But here locally in San Francisco, we actually have a consultant we work with called Peter Daly. And so every year, Peter Daly in this company of consultants give us reports about various types of improvements. And so we have an ADU cost report that goes with it. And this is a survey that's been created from interviews with a variety of contractors in the city. And it has different levels. Like, so we'll have an economy grade, like an average or good grade, right? We'll call standard, right? And then you'll have like a good, excellent grade, which is more customization. Okay. And so we'll break it down. And usually there's a range for price per square foot, low, medium, high in each of those 3 categories. Okay. But that's how we do it, right? So it could be the income approach. Remember, we're going to apply all 3 approaches when it comes to valuation of properties. But the ADU is probably more likely to lean on the income approach, especially if it's a rental. So you don't rent it, then we're probably going to look more like the cost approach. And we'll add what's called an entrepreneurial profit on top of that. Maybe that's anywhere from 10 to 30%. Okay. And that's going to be added to the total value for what this new ADU is adding for the base year of this new property, existing property. Any benefit from having an R2 zoning versus R1 appraisal wise? Not really, because guess what? You can always change any of these zonings. They have this thing called a variance, okay? And the variance is in every city, right? State of California already, because they're superseding the local jurisdictions, it already gives you the ability to, if you're an R1, to add a second unit called an ADU. So you're already grandfathered in with the state of California with those new laws that have passed. So it really doesn't matter for R1 or R2. Then there's also the variance piece. That's when you go meet with planning and then you propose that you want to expand the amount of units, right? Now, you can get shot down there in terms of not being approved, but they will have a hearing, you'll do an application. And I will let you know that is a very transparent process, because the moment you go meet with the planning department, they type in this information, they put an application out there, and then it's public information that our office also knows. We use a website that tells us everything, right? Whether it's the planning information or it's the Department of Building information, and that even holds all the complaints and violations as well. So we know a lot. But in terms of your having a benefit of R2 zoning or R1, appraisal wise, it kind of doesn't matter, because nowadays it's so flexible what you can do with one or both of these types of the zoning. So you can kind of create value by getting a variance.
Al?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael. Got something else?
If I may add something, when a free appraisal goes out to the property, it really doesn't matter what R1 or R2, R3, or even 4. It's based on what the structure is standing at the site. If, for example, if a house, for example, you have an R2 zoning, and that is a single family home with an in-law unit, that is going to be valued with similar comps, not legal duplexes, but comps properties that are single family homes with a finished basement.
Right. And so you're comparing apples to apples instead of apples and oranges and grapefruits, right? And it tends to be more valuable when you do have a single family adding an ADU versus having a duplex and just having both of those than adding an ADU. Banks are willing to lend you more on a single family purchase versus a multifamily purchase. And it also shows in the market value too. When you go to sell a multi-unit property, you tend to get less than what you would for a single family home, even half the size, right? It could be your next door neighbor has a single family and you have a duplex, and they're able to sell it for a higher price than you with the multifamily.
If I can ask something, that is also true because people spend more money on their own homes than on the rental unit. Typically, you find the best quality in the single family home, not in multifamily housing.
That's correct. That's correct. Hey, let's go to this last week. We got to wrap up. I think we want to get you guys out of here. But Anonymous is just plugging away. If your yard is super windy and you want to enclose it so the space is usable, right? Is this considered livable square footage, taxable? Oh yeah, absolutely. So the moment you go converting a covered patio or even a patio in general, and you make it like a sunroom, we'll reassess it as a sunroom. But say you want to condition it. When I say condition it, I mean add heating and cooling to that space, right? With a finished kind of floor. That's going to be more on the it's going to increase your gross living area. The sunroom, it kind of depends on what it is. So sunrooms tend to be a lower value, right? Maybe it's a 10, 50,000, right? But if you improve that space, and I'm just giving you round ballpark numbers. If you improve that space and becomes part of the GLA, maybe it's anywhere from $150 to $250 a square foot added value, right? And so it is taxable, it is reassessable only for that portion that you did the conversion or the change of the new, what we call new construction. So just so you know, it could be a reassessment. There's a 7-story affordable housing about to be built 6 blocks from my property. Is that considered a calamity? No, absolutely not. It's called improvement. Improvement of a neighborhood. So a calamity, let me explain what a calamity is. A calamity is, say for instance, you had a fire in the kitchen and spread throughout the house and you have smoke damage, but you have a burnt out kitchen and maybe the side of your house is completely burnt. That's a calamity. Or maybe you were sleeping at night and you forgot you put some dishes in the dishwasher and turned it on, and then the dishwasher connection on the supply line burst and it floods out the whole first floor in your basement. That's a calamity. Or maybe somebody's driving through the neighborhood late at night and they're drunk and they blow through a stop sign and you're on the opposite side of that stop sign and they blow through your front of your house. That's a calamity. When we're talking about affordable housing coming up, that's not a calamity. In fact, that's an improvement to a neighborhood because you're turning something that was non-existent into something that's existent. And when it comes to housing, when it's inexistent makes it more it makes it more valuable, right? Say for instance, this was vacant land. If you have a swath of vacant land in your neighborhood, that's actually lowering the value of your neighborhood. When someone's building housing, that's increasing the value of your neighborhood. So 6 blocks away from your neighborhood is actually improving the value because now you have new construction coming up. You have new value being added to that area. And it's a big deal right now. There's not enough housing in the Bay Area. And so in a way, that's what kind of artificially pushes up these values on these properties because we're not building them as fast as we need to occupy them. And then it comes to the builders, there's not enough general contractors. The cost to do business here in California is definitely a higher hurdle for developers to enter the marketplace. And so when you do see housing coming up, it is definitely a benefit. What is the best way to find comps if you don't have access for a realtor side for the MLS? That's a good question. So, because comp may have been a tenant or pest issue. Okay, that's okay. You can have tenant or pest issues. Now, before I had the MLS here, right, what I would do is use this tool called Redfin. You've probably seen Redfin commercials. And I'm not endorsing them or anything like that, but I'm just telling you it's a free tool out there that you can easily pull up some comps. So you'll type in redfin.com. redfin.com. Now here you can essentially look at what has recently sold. It's not going to allow you to go back too far though, but you can probably get like a year's worth of sales in your neighborhood and then kind of toggle through their different comps to find out what those interiors look like, what those values are. That's a great way to get your comps, right? And so you can also save a picture from there and print out some of the data, and because you'll need to use that when you're submitting your comparables, and you'll want to complete what we call a sales grid, right? So you have your subject property in column A, and then column B through, let's call it D. You'll have the comparables 1, 2, and 3, maybe 4, and you'll make adjustments on your comparables to equalize them with your house. And so you'll want to use a tool like Redfin to do that, and it's a great research tool. And at the end of the day, you don't have to hire a realtor. Use them for the service that they are supposed to. They don't get paid until they render service, which means sell your property or fulfill and put a tenant in, right? But here you can get comps from them. Feel free to give them a call. You're not making any promises, and you're looking for like a BPO. What will my property be worth as of January 1 of this year or whatever your event date is? So that's a kind of a free and cheap way to do it. Be careful of some of these other ones like Zillow and stuff like that. They'll say your property is worth a number, and maybe that's not true. But Zillow doesn't know specifics about your house, and they're actually throwing that net out so far. They're looking at the whole zip code of single-family homes or duplexes. So you got to be careful with some of these tools out there. They might say your property is worth more than it is, or worth a lot less than it is. So just be careful. I will put that caveat out there. Use discernment. And call a professional. Like I said, if you call a realtor, you don't owe them anything. You call an appraiser, though, you do owe them something because you're going to pay for a fee appraisal. Michael, what is the going rate for a fee appraisal in the San Francisco Bay Area?
The fee appraisal is at least $400 because it has increased within the past couple of years. I have heard people paying $550, $600 even for a rush job.
Oh, definitely.
Because appraisers are definitely busy. A lot of appraisers, since the downturn, have left the business. Some have retired, and some, like me, ended up in the assessor's office.
That's right, a little more secure. Yeah, so that's how that is. If I can address one other thing, there was a tenant or a pest issue on a comp. So when you lay out your comparables in the sales grid, you'll make adjustments for having a tenant. Like when I say having not just any tenant, right? If you have a tenant, that could be very good. You can be getting market rents. But what if you have a protected tenant that's only paying about a quarter of what the market rent is for that unit, right? So then you want to make the adjustment on your comparable that this has a protected tenant, and you'll add value to that. So because that's a negative compared to your property who doesn't have a protected tenant and doesn't have those situations. So you want to add value to that comparable that has the protected tenant or has some kind of pest issue. Maybe they have $50,000 worth of pest work that they have to do, right? You'll add some what we call deferred maintenance or condition value to your comparable. So that's how I would adjust it. You guys are just firing them away. All right. Well, the assessor will look at sold or active comps. That's a good question. We're really looking at sold comps, right? However, activity in the neighborhood gives us an idea of where that value is going. Is it stable? Is it increasing or declining, right? And so we could look at some active stuff. However, we're not going to use those active comps because appraisers are only really looking at what the market has actually done, whether they sold it on the market or off the market. They only want to see what the transactions that have actually been completed have done. But say, for instance, you bought this property and you bought it, say, December 31st of 2021, and you paid $2 million. And then as of this year, you go to refi and the refinance is like, no, we're not going to give you the purchase price value. This does happen, folks. Don't be alarmed. It is common with banks. But now you're like, oh no, the refi only told me it was worth 1.5, or they're only going to give you 1.5, right? But you just paid $2 million about 7 months ago, right? Well, what we're going to do is use comp number one as the subject, right? And we could use comp number one as the subject regardless of the date that it closes, right? And we do have what's called a 90-day rule. So from the event date, we can only go, and you can only go 90 days forward from that event. However, when you're putting it in reverse and going backwards, you can go back, maybe a couple months, a year. It depends on the property type. Some property types don't have very many comparables, and you have to kind of expand your timeline. But for the most part, remember the 90-day rule is from the event date, whether it's the lien date or the date of your CIO, 90 days forward. Okay, so you can't go any further than that. And remember that when if you're thinking about doing a formal appeal or appeal with us, it's very important. The 90-day rule. I don't want you guys to have these comps thrown out because you went 90 days over.
Al, if I may say something here.
Please.
In response to the poster, in San Francisco, the listing price is artificially set low to encourage multiple bids. So the active price or listing price may not be suggestive of the market value because it's going to be bid up.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't see any more questions here. I'm going to wrap this up. Michael, excellent job, my friend. Thank you for telling us about how to really, de-identify our homes when we're doing a refi and kind of spruce it up a little bit so you get the highest value on your refinance or your appraisal, right? For fee side, right? And Kenneth, thank you for organizing this. Thank you, Joaquin. being the assessor here and making this event available to everybody. My name is Al Barber. I've been an appraiser, kind of explaining some of the options you got here. And our website is full of information, and you also have the AAB information. If you guys want to plug that in, that'd be excellent, so they can have something to take home, something to chew on. Remember, your notice of assessed values are in the mail, and they'll be arriving soon. You know, and it's not all that bad. There's some people that, you know, you want to see it go. I want to see my assessment go up because that means I'm getting more equity in my property. You know, so there's benefits to it. Right. And remember, taxes pay for all the things we use, sometimes abuse here in the city.
Thank you, Al, for a engaging presentation. As always, you're very positive.
It's all good. All right, I'm going to take it back and send it back to the folks that brought us here today. And thank you all for showing up. And it's been my pleasure to answer questions and do a little presentation with you. Well, maybe I'll wrap us up. Thank you all for joining us, and we appreciate you taking your time and expending your energy. Thank you for all the wonderful questions, and I hope you have an awesome and amazing day just like us. And if you ever need some help, you can call your appraiser. Don't call me. No, I'm just playing. But yeah, have a great day. Check out our website, check out the AAB, and remember all those resources we shared with you today too. All right, you all, have a great day, and may you be awesome and amazing. Thank you very much.